then and now. Let us begin, as we usually do, with the Sunday congregational prayer. The words will be shown. You can recite this together with me. Let us now pray together. We offer our salutations to the all-loving being who endows all beings with consciousness. We meditate on the Lord, who is the origin of the universe. Lord, thou abidest in all. Thou art all. Thou assumest all forms. Thou art the origin and goal of all. Thou art the self of all. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss. Salutations unto thee. May the world be peaceful. May the wicked become gentle. May all creatures think of mutual welfare. May their minds be occupied with what is spiritual and abiding. May our hearts be immersed in selfless love for the Lord. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So if you're wondering about the title and the topics for tonight, Swami had asked me, because he was going to be in India, I think he's in Germany right now on his way back, to arrange a program. And I thought about it for a little bit. And I said, you know, sometimes we meet people, we see the same faces, but we don't really get to know people on a deeper level. And every time I do get to know somebody on a deeper level, what I find is there's so much to that individual. People have so much talents, so many unique ideas or experiences, that I thought it would be a good opportunity for us to share them with each other tonight. So a few weeks back on the Sunday program, I announced that we would be taking volunteers for people to share some element of their spiritual life. And I had provided a list of suggested questions, but that was only a guideline. So we have quite a very interesting agenda for you tonight. Just some of the guidelines for the speakers. Each speaker's been allocated a slot of about 7 minutes. Some folks are going to run a little bit longer, some a little bit shorter, but on average, we should be about 7 minutes per person. With 7 speakers, that's about 49 minutes with my introduction and the closing and everything. Should be bringing us right to about a 1-hour program, which is our standard Sunday program. Before we begin, do I have the... Yeah, I'm going to need that. I would like to begin the program by recognizing Swami Savagatananda, the former Swami in charge for this center. He actually did this center and the Boston Center for many years in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, and he retired just about the time I came here for the first time, so I never heard him lecture live, but I was very fortunate to have several meetings with that Swami in a small group setting, which really, it was a treasure. So we recognize his 106th birth anniversary tonight and celebrate this dear Swamiji shown there. November 27th? Okay. Okay, but we're celebrating it tonight. Okay. So we pause to remember Swami Savagatananda. And my thoughts for the program, again, just sharing our thoughts as we hear from the different speakers tonight. We may pick up new insights. Maybe it was a question or a spiritual background that we started out with. Maybe it's something that we're still asking ourselves, so maybe they'll share some insight that will open up a new thought pattern for you in that regard. It also brings us better understanding, right? So we know Vedanta encourages us to see the divine in all. And so by hearing the stories and people sharing their talents and their spiritual journey with us, we will get some deeper understanding of that. And seeing the divine, how it manifests. One element is the Shakti, the energy form of the mother, which takes so many forms and so many aspects, and we will see some of that tonight. So with that, the list of speakers, I have basically put down the order together. I'll call the folks up. The first person to be speaking tonight will be Charles Feldman, and his topic is From Identity Crisis to Finding a Spiritual Home. So Charlie, please take the podium and begin your talk.
Oh, you want this here? So like Chet said, many of you probably don't know me that well, so if you don't know me, that means you're not disappointed in me. But now that you get to know me, who knows? No, but seriously. Well, namaste, everyone. Jai, jai. Growing up, I found most everything to be meaningless because I was not brought up with any ideal or religion at home. When I was in college, I joined a radical socialist group because a guy in my dorm was in the group and he asked me to join. After I joined, I found out the group had a complete ideology that members were supposed to agree with. And after a while, I found that I was no closer to understanding the reasons behind the ideology, so I left the group. Being exposed to a variety of different points of view in college made me realize that people believed in all sorts of things. And that left me with a major identity crisis. So my college experience was that people of all political stripes were amiable, whereas it seemed that people who derived their meaning in life from religion were intolerant. In college, I viewed myself as someone who reasoned things out, but in reality, I often thought I was supposed to believe in certain things, and so I now think that faith, rather than reason, often determines what we believe in. Years later, I was reading a book in which it said that the body is very complex, and I wondered how, when the body is being formed, the blood vessels and the nerves and the bones and the organs all know how to coordinate with each other and not bump into each other. This led me to think that there may be a designer or a God. I attended a Unitarian Universalist church for a number of years, which advocated total freedom of conscience, but which gave me no solution to my identity crisis. In fact, the class I liked best there was called Building Your Own Theology. We were expected to do everything on our own, and for me, there was no real guidance or background. Then one day, it was actually John who said he was going to a service at the Vedanta Society and asked me to come along. I had explored various churches and temples, and I did not expect to fit in. I had tried meditating in the past, but I didn't get past the stage of being too restless. No other religious organization had satisfied my curiosity. At the Vedanta Society, I learned that there is one ultimate reality which we are all part of. In fact, we are all one. I had previously thought that one religion must be true and all the others not true, but here I learned that all religions are paths to God. I have heard two different rabbis in two different places say that either Jesus is the Messiah or he isn't, and either Muhammad is the final prophet or he isn't, so that only one religion can be true. But I now know that people can reach God through all paths, and this is what makes them true. Previously, I had thought that people were basically good, and if we organized society in the right way, we could perfect it. Now I know that greed, anger, and pride are in the ego, and not just in the social structure. I had also been influenced by nihilist views that implied that life is a game, so it doesn't really matter what you do. I thought that somewhere deep down the nihilists had an ideal and that they were trying to get people to be open-minded by seeing through their contradictions and games. I didn't know how to reconcile nihilism with my desire for social justice. Now I know that we cannot change the world because it is like trying to straighten out a dog's curly tail. But if we are unselfish, we can advance spiritually. If we are all one, we cannot really hurt anyone but ourselves, or help anyone but ourselves. If we work and love for their own sakes and not for any external gain, we will grow spiritually. In the Bhagavad Gita, it says that God works unceasingly, even though he has nothing personally to gain from it. I believe that only God has free will because he has no pre-existing motive to do anything, whereas all of the rest of us do. Swami Vivekananda said that with an increase in pleasure comes an increase in pain. This is the contradictory nature of Maya, so we must transcend the world rather than trying to perfect it. Swami Yogatmananda has said that if we're being chased by a tiger in a dream, the way out is not to run away from the tiger, but to wake up. Similarly, if there is political or economic oppression in a dream or this world, the goal is to wake up or realize God. Previously, I had read books by mystics saying that we're all one. At the Vedanta Society, I learned that God can be both formless and with form. The Western idea is a formless God with attributes, which many of Sri Ramakrishna's devotees had before they came to him. But how can the infinite have attributes? The Western idea is that there is the infinite God and then there's the world. But how can God be infinite if there is something outside of God? That would mean that there is the infinite plus something else, which makes no sense. At the Vedanta Society, I have learned that the world is a part of God, and it eventually dissolves into God, so it is ultimately unreal. All concepts of God are steps on the way, and in that sense they are true. One thing that I have thought about recently is that Ishwara, or God with form, who rules the universe, must be infinite in time and space, because if he were finite, that would mean there would be time and space beyond him, which makes no sense. But it is a paradox that God as a form can be infinite in time and space, because how can a form be infinite? This proves that unless I am making a basic mistake, our reason can only take us so far, and that only our intuition and direct experience can take us beyond that. Vedanta says that God incarnates so that we can form a relationship with him. I don't think I would have lasted long in a religion that simply said to go directly to the infinite and merge with that. We need devotion along the way. I find my path to devotion in spiritual music of all traditions, and mostly in Vedanta classes, retreats, services, and literature, as well as in the spiritual literature of other traditions. This is how I connect to God. I'm attempting to have more of a connection as time goes on through the grace of God. Jai Sri Ramakrishna, Jai Sri Sarada Devi, Jai Sri Swami Vivekananda. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Charlie. I think if you didn't know Charlie before, you have a much more better feel for who Charlie is and what his background is. And he's actually been a past speaker here at symposiums and I think a few full 1 hour talks as well. Next on our list is Wailuko. I know him as Wailuko, and despite my prompting for a second name, he said, no, just go with Wailuko. So that's what is in the program for tonight. His chosen topic for tonight is Lessons from My Awakening. Wailuko, please take the podium.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Wailuko, and I'm an empath. I get information sometimes, downloads. This happened even when I consider myself atheist, agnostic. I was about 25, and I got the information that my best friend was going to kill himself. Suicide. I didn't know what to do. Maybe it was just in my head. I wrote some songs about it, made an album, went on tour, and I came home from the tour and found out, oh, he didn't kill himself. I was wrong. Then I went to go to his house, and I got a call. He killed himself. So it happened exactly like I thought. And I blame myself because I knew before I even left. And I carried that guilt, and it built up into me until I just became so depressed that I became handicapped. I laid in bed, depression, pain meds. It was pretty messed up for about 10 years of my life. And I started to work through it, and I got through it. And miraculously, my spinal damage healed. I thought, wow, that's amazing. If I can get over my friend's suicide and heal part of my back, what happens if I get over everything? So I said, let's work through all of my problems, childhood, everything. So I started to get more spiritual because I knew there was now a body, mind, spirit connection. And just went to YouTube and started doing guided meditations. And I would kind of go into a nice state, like go look at clouds, picture stuff. It was relaxing. And YouTube suggested one of the chakra ones. Like, well, I've heard of chakras. I don't really know what they are, but, I'll do it. So I laid there and I did a chakra meditation in my bed, and I felt my spine being realigned as if a chiropractor was adjusting me. While laying flat on my back, my spine actually realigned. I felt my chakras being cleared, and I went into a meditation for a couple of hours. I thought, well, that's amazing. I guess there's something to these chakras. I'm going to do that again. So a couple of days later, I decided to do it again. And this time, someone told me about asking the question, who am I? And I was pondering that. And I thought, let's just let go of everything. Let's fully surrender and let go of all this past attachment to, being a musician, this image I created of myself as this, rock star or whatever. All these identities, just let it go. I said, God, just take it all away. Let me know who I really, really am. And I laid down and I did the meditation. I felt my spine being realigned. I felt the cleansing thing. And then my breath slowed down very, very slow, as if I wasn't even breathing. And it just almost stopped like microns, and it was like I was watching myself. And a ball of energy at the bottom of my spine felt like this big, started to come all the way up my spine. Slowly, 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 and I was just watching it. And when it came to around my throat, I suddenly had all the realizations of all the religious teachings I ever heard, and how they all made sense, the true teachings of Jesus that I heard growing up. I understood them. I understood all religions to be true. It was just unreal. And then the energy came up, and it came up to here, and I experienced the universe's energy as vibrations, as notes, because I'm a musician. I saw all of us as a note. And there were no bad notes, like there are no bad people. They're just notes going to be into and are on their way and on a path, and there's no good or bad. It's just energy and motion, and we're all just a part of this symphony. And as I was having this realization, I thought to myself, who's the composer of this symphony? And all of a sudden, that downloaded into me. I am. I, in the big universal sense, not just me. I am God. And it exploded, and my third eye opened, and energy was just rushing through my spine. And I entered in this state, and I thought at that moment, I was enlightened. I became a Buddha or whatever. I'm not one of these people. But in that moment, I had no reference. I thought I was. And so I entered in this high state of being, and it lasted about 2 months, where I just felt this energy up my spine, and I started having all these realizations that came to me. And the cities that we talk about, the powers, they started coming, and I had a lot of them. But I kept thinking it was me doing them. Like, I have this realization. I no longer felt pain. It was amazing. But it was I no longer feeling pain. And as it went along, this started to fade away, and I didn't know why. And then I started chasing enlightenment like a drug, so I could stay in that state at all times or reach higher stuff. And it never came, and it went away. And I didn't know why. And I did a lot of searching, and I discovered Vedanta, and I realized that I am God. I kind of understood what God was, but I didn't really understand the I behind it. I didn't fully reach that. But as my ego disappeared and the past let go, I re-identified myself as a spiritual person who had these powers, who knew all these things and all that. And the ego got strong again. I got distracted on the path. And I developed spiritual pride. And as the ego reinserts itself, you get farther and farther away from that goal. You can't chase enlightenment. I didn't do anything for this to happen to me. I surrendered to God, and it happened through me by grace. So I can't take credit for any of it. And when the powers come to you, don't take credit for it. Don't think that you are doing any of it, because it's just grace coming through you. As soon as you attach to that, that will take you away from the path, because the path to enlightenment, to God realization, is not through any powers. It's not through any sense of I. It's through grace. Ramakrishna had a lot of cities, and he offered them to Swami Vivekananda. And Swami Vivekananda asked, will these help me to realize God? And Ramakrishna said no, and Vivekananda said no, then I don't want them. Because he knew God realization is the point. So always just remember, God realization is the point. And if they come, but it's through the grace of God. don't go seeking them, because they're not what you think they are. Just surrender to God and grace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wailuko, for sharing your very personal and intense journey. As I was listening, it reminded me of what Swami Vivekananda wrote in his Raja Yoga. He says, yes, indeed, some people stumble on those states by accident, but in most cases, they come away with they could be shaken or some very superstitious kind of thing, but by the proper applications, as you point out, through the proper channels, those who come to that state knowingly and with the guidance of a teacher survive through that state with lesser pain and lesser problems. So thank you for that very personal sharing. Next we have John Gallagher, whose chosen topic is the spiritual aspects of the 12 steps. John, please come to the podium. Thank you.
Well, it took me 6 steps to get here to the podium, so I cheated. Oh, round about 2001, I had a sponsor, an AA sponsor, tell me, John, your problem is you are seeking earthly solutions to your spiritual problems. So today I search for spiritual solutions to my spiritual problems, and one of the places I come is here. Well, you know, when he said that back in 2001, I started coming to the Vedanta Society in December of 2001. Like Vedanta talks about different paths to enlightenment, you know, different religions or different paths to enlightenment. The 12-step programs allow you to choose the higher power of your understanding. So, you know, it's very secular in that sense. So I'm here to talk about the 12 steps. I don't know if I'm going to go through all 12 steps, but the first step, and I went through Alcoholics Anonymous, but the first step is to admit. The first verb in the 12-step program is to admit. It's an ego puncturing step, you might say. And where have we heard where have we been suggested to, you might say, dissolve our egos before? I've heard it in these halls. But for me to say that I admitted I was an alcoholic would be such an understatement, because there's so many things that I'm powerless over. There's such deep underlying causes of unmanageability. I've been powerless over depression, and I've also gone to Depression Anonymous. Emotions, I've gone to Emotions Anonymous. I was powerless in my handling affairs and financially. I went to Debtors Anonymous. I didn't put all my eggs in one basket. When I seek spiritual solutions, I seek it from multiple sources. You know, this is one of the sources I come to. The second step came to believe that a higher power can restore me to sanity, which suggests that I've gone insane. It's another thing I have to admit. I have to. I don't have the time to go into that. But I found out when I can't rely on human power. I have to rely on a power greater than myself, a spiritual power. And I believe that the 12-step programs is like a tool. Now, the steps suggest movement. It doesn't suggest stagnation. It's up to me to take the steps, or it's up to anybody else to take some steps if they want to achieve a higher spiritual understanding, you might say, or a higher way to cope. See, that's what I really need, is coping skills, because I am so powerless without a higher power, without a higher source, without a spiritual source. One of the acronyms that you hear in the halls of AA is GOD, good orderly direction. GOD, God, good orderly direction. And without good orderly direction, you know, I am so powerless. So I'll end it with this. It's not a lot of time. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. I've certainly in my lifetime had bad direction, that's for sure. A bum steer. You know, the AA book and, you know, other 12-step traditions talk about having to hit bottom, a spiritual bottom, multiple humiliations. In my case, it was a lot of shame and guilt of my past misdeeds. You know, I haven't always been a good boy. But today, at least if I'm powerless if I'm powerless over not being able to help people, at least I'm not hurting them to the same degree that I did in the past. So, you know, spirituality, you know, spiritual discipline is working. Spiritual understanding is working. I get it from multiple sources. Last thing I wanted to talk about, well, step 4, we do writing. And we have to write a moral inventory and write about resentments. Oh, I sure was powerless over that too. There's nothing more painful than when you hate somebody and love somebody at the same time and you can't control that hatred, you know, over resentment. And I had to write down where I was selfish in my, you know, in my dealings with others, and you know, where I was fearful, where I was dishonest, and it makes me think of the 3 poisons they talk about in Buddhism. The 3 poisons to spiritual development, you might say: greed, ill will toward others, and delusions. And you know, I see a parallel. The greed is the selfishness, you know, that's in that I had to write about. The honesty, the opposite of that is the delusions. And one more thing is the resentment was the ill will. And those 3 things I certainly had to work on. And I've run out of time. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for that very heartfelt and soul-stirring story of your life and sharing it with the group. I think the ideas that I had when I put this program together are certainly manifesting. As you meet people and talk to people, you realize how much everybody has. Talents, also hardships as well. And so again, it gives us a better understanding and appreciation for those that we share this journey with. Next up we have Art is Spiritual Practice. This will be a talk given by Bernadette Pace. and it has a multimedia component, which I'll do the slides for you. So please take the podium, Bernadette. And she'll talk about art as spiritual practice.
This is an awesome hour, and I'm really glad to be steeped in these minutes. And I'm grounding into the floor because I'm very, very excited. So it could be art as spiritual practice. It also could be art as meditation, and certainly the meditations that have come through the inspiration that permeates through this building and the holy people that I've heard about and read about and have experienced here. So we have slide 1. I was able to steadily take yoga classes about 10 years ago, and there was something very different in me during and after those classes. Learning to be present and to understand the body and instruct with a focused mind was challenging and yielded a bit of peace. So now I'm a certified yoga teacher. I'm an artist, and specifically a package designer and an illustrator. I tell you this because this is how I process my Vedanta experiences, as well as my other life experiences through the lens of an artist and a lifelong seeker. Last fall, I had my intentions of attending a night of chanting somewhere close to here in Providence. I waited at that location and no one showed up. And so I found myself walking into this building and totally mesmerized by the dimension that this place, this energy has. I felt like I was walking into another dimension. It's a rare atmosphere here. I can feel it. I can't explain it. So I listened to my first lecture by Swami Yogatmananda, and I found myself writing notes and sketches on the weekly flyer. And I did that for like months. I was like writing in the weekly flyer. But the next week, Swami left for India. But I never went back to that other organization. I kept coming back here. I was immediately tuned to the material through my yoga teacher studies. I continued to come to classes regularly and love the lectures, and a favorite activity of mine is the Saturday meditations, Swami's guided meditations. So I wanted to show you how I interpret images within my meditations or follow a lecture or a Vedantan reading. Recently, I started using the circle or mandala as a way to banter with my ideas, to enter, limit, and unify concepts in which I've been introduced. These are just sketches, so remember that these are just sketches, nothing elaborate, but an effective supplement for me in conjunction with verbal or written teachings. So we go to slide 2. Here I was considering alchemy, infinite consciousness, merging with not this, not that concept. And slide 3 is an image of a stylized lotus, allowing the mind to travel and touch into God consciousness. So I do maybe 1 or 2 of these a morning, and they might take just a few minutes, or I might linger on and go back into reading something or going back through my little flyers. So slide 4 is got into, this is the whole packaging thing. You know, I have to make something that's useful. This is a travel or portable altar using Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda on the left inside shutter, and Sarada on the right inside shutter. The precious inside can be closed to protect the teacher by no other than Hanuman. Around New Year's 2018, Swami held an entire day of worship. This is really memorable for me. I arrived late in the afternoon, and I know he was holding space in the morning and the afternoon and in the evening. We sang 108 chants. He sang at the organ, and he was just unwavering in his determination. I met him afterwards, and he asked me what was wrong with my eyes. And there was a problem with my eye. We discussed it for a while, and he said, you know, in that way he might point at you, and he's got that little smile on his face. And he said to me, well, you'll just have to see with the eye of your heart. And that's slide number 5. So, you know, the eye with the heart mandala can't really describe the type of transition that I went through when he spoke that to me. I had a little post-it note in my study for me to remember this. So during a Saturday meditation, the next picture arose, and equally as powerful for me. The shapes and color notations feel as if I'm reviewing the lecture or lesson or experience, and there seems to be a space in my mind where these images make their home along with some vital, ancient, yet current concepts. So the next slide. I participated in some great opportunities at Vedanta. The summer's meditathon was very helpful to acclimate sitting for a long duration of time and to further initiate the foundation concerning spiritual and personal empowerment in regards to the changing quality of my mind. Also this year, Swami asked me to lead a yoga session during Pravajika Gita Brahma's Psychology of Yoga retreat. I can tell you I was deeply humbled and transformed by the flowing clarity of information and love emanating from all who attended. I understood grace was always present that day. I understood what grace was, how it was coming to me, along with the ever-flowing love. And that's slide 6. My experience is that Vedanta has a methodology which is quietly and undeniably revealed to an aspirant. The path is there. So that slide, the next slide. I can tell you I have learned to cultivate a very practical way for a more neutral and compassionate living, more ahimsa, and more understanding of Brahman nature. I consider myself a human being with a capital B. I can tell you I feel the great river of change, which is also changeless, and that is happening within me as well. And that's the last slide. I see myself becoming more fluid, both a particle and a wave, flowing and dissolving into that ocean. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernadette, for sharing your art and your story with us. I think it was very inspiring how you translate the Vedantic teachings and the inspirations into the visual medium. I know there are different learning styles. I tend to be a visual learner myself, so when I see things, I can really feel it, so I appreciate it very much. Next we have Chris Freed, who will be discussing My Spiritual Wanderings. Chris, please come to the podium.
Well, hello. I've tried to organize some thoughts about my experiences with religion and spirituality. I've had plenty of thoughts. I don't know how much organization I had, but plenty. But I don't come from a family background practicing. There was no practicing religion in my background. But kind of my mother's father was a Presbyterian minister, and whatever happened between them left her allergic to to religion and Christianity. And I had a kind of a similar, experience growing up. There were Christians in my group of friends, and you would get hit with this paradigm that the big debate was whether you were going to go to hell if you weren't a Christian, which for some of us, that kind of it's unfortunate when, I don't know if it's enthusiasm or ego, whatever it is, that when you try to shove your belief down somebody's throat. But my father's family also, they were German Lutherans who came here a couple of hundred years ago to escape a religious war, the 30 Years' War in Europe, and it had a lot to do with founding a church and practicing in a church, and there's a generation of family graves down the street from this church in this small town in Pennsylvania. But by the time my father came around, his brothers stuck with it in the church, but he was unchurched. But his growing up there was a lot of religious background there. And I remember as a child him talking about Jesus. We were coming from a kind of a verbal family. There was always long dinners and big discussions. And Jesus always he had been exposed to Jesus. And in life we all make, I guess you have these exposures, and they're sort of like seeds that get planted in you. You have an idea, and perhaps at some point it develops into something else or whatever. But so eventually I got out of high school, and they were in the verge of a divorce, and went out to California, living in California, working in a wood shop. And one of the guys that I work with had lived in the San Francisco Zen Center, and I got an opportunity to take a Japanese carpentry class up at Green Gulch Farm, which some of you it's pretty well known, pretty famous place. It's a Zen monastery that's built in the Japanese, very traditional, very authentic, just north of San Francisco. So on Sundays we would go up there and take this carpentry class, and it's kind of a wow place. Like there's Japanese bridges, and there's a monastery, and there's tea houses, and it's an interesting example. Like I was a young man with no real knowledge of Buddhism or anything, but it's interesting how that communicates to you. Like if you walk through a beautiful Japanese garden and there's a beautiful shrine, you don't have to have read any books, or you can get it. I mean, it's like this is a very mindful, very focused, very clear kind of way of life. So just being up there, and then we wound up going for talks, and I would occasionally go for talks. And being a 19-year-old kid, you wander into a beautiful traditional zendo, and you sit down next to a Japanese monk, in robes and shaved head. It's kind of like, I didn't really, kind of quite believe they opened the door to you, to enter this world. So that left quite an impression on me. Okay, all right. Well, I'm getting, as I figured, the organization. I'm getting a little carried away. But I came back to Providence, eventually discovered the Providence Zen Center, a meditation group, which was a Korean Zen master. Some of you may have some exposure to him. He passed away about 10 years ago and wound up living there for a couple of years, and got a lot of teachings that have, there's certain things that stand out about the place and still refer to. And one of the interesting things about Buddhism, as I was exposed to it, is that they don't tell you what you have to believe. The emphasis is kind of flipped on what do you understand. And in my case, I didn't understand that much. But you go for the interview with the teacher, and you go down the hall, and you sit in front of him and ask you a question, and he shakes his head, no, you don't understand. And so, okay, he's giving time. Time flies, but I wound up running into an Indian guru, Amma, who I'm still involved with, 20 years, and had some very positive experiences around her, which led me to here to see what she is associated with the goddess Kali, and which Ramakrishna was a Kali priest, and wound up here trying to like flesh out my understanding of that tradition. And after some years there, some years here, I started to feel maybe a little bit like my involvement here was a little bit cerebral, like gathering a lot of information, but not having a strong practice. And to make a long story short, just briefly, one afternoon I wandered into the mosque, which I had had an interest in, read the Quran, and within 15 minutes I was sitting on the floor with a guy from Sri Lanka and somewhere else in front of a big platter of lamb, having discussions about Islam and personal things and everything else. I went there about 2 years, read the Quran a couple of times, went there a couple of years, and then took Shahada. And I was in the mosque about 7 years, and I don't suppose I have much time to go into that whole subject. Interesting. One thing about Sri Ramakrishna is you read sometimes that he worshipped everywhere, they say, including even a mosque, or including a mosque, which is a little asterisk. Like in Islam, there's a lot of identity politics. They define the world in terms of believers and unbelievers, or sometimes more insulting terms. It's a little bit labeling, but my personal feelings from what I've known, and I was also exposed to some Sufi masters, and there's a spectrum, there's a tremendous spectrum in Islam. And my personal feeling is that the Quran is authentic. There's something you can feel there. And but it also has a lot of context. It was trying to organize, there's something metaphysical there in terms of a profound truth, and there's also a lot of temporal stuff they were trying to, which makes it's a huge subject. But I appreciate with Vedanta, I don't like having limits put on me, and you have the freedom to explore as you see fit, as you're called, and so I'm really back. I've never went away from Vedanta, but I was not that closely. So I'm back here and trying to put it all together, all these little pieces somehow. So.
Thank you very much, Chris. And I think Vedanta teaches the harmony of all religions. So I think if you stand to put it all together, this is probably the teachings of Vedanta are probably a good foundation for understanding the interrelationships. Next we have a talk, Loving Support from Vedanta by Peter Travasano. Peter, please come.
Well, it's so good to be here. Religion can seem pretty complicated sometimes, but when we really get down to it, it can actually be really very simple. And what really works for me is just experiencing religion really as an expression of love, both from devotees and from the teachers and swamis that we have here at Vedanta, and also as an outpouring of personal love to the folks here at Vedanta, or my family, or the people that I work with. That makes it a little bit simpler for me. It's a little harder to wrap my head around some of the more complicated Vedantic ideas, but that's just me. They say in Indian traditions that a really fortunate person has three things: a human birth, a desire for illumination, and the experience of having an illumined teacher. And I would say that we here at Vedanta have all of those things. I think we all have a human birth. I think we can all agree to that. And we all have a a yearning for illumination. That's why most of us are really here. I can't think of another reason why a person would be here. And we're lucky, really, to have personal contact with the Swami that we have here and the many illumined teachers that come through the doors here. We're really very fortunate in that way. In my own experience, prior to coming to Vedanta, I always had an interest in religion, and Eastern religion in particular, and I was involved in a society that was really very large, and the teachings were really good, but one thing that you didn't get was personal contact with the teacher. That just really didn't happen. But we're exposed to a lot of different things, and if you're interested in Indian philosophy, it's absolutely impossible not to be exposed to Ramakrishna. So I kept hearing about Ramakrishna, and every once in a while I'd get a little taste of his teachings, and every time I did, I said, that's really great. So one day I just went out and dropped $35 on the whole Gospel of Ramakrishna, that thick. For what reason, I don't know, and just started reading it. And after a few weeks, I'd gotten through maybe a couple of hundred pages, and I said, this is absolutely it for me. So I started looking around for some Ramakrishna groups, you know. I mean, every place has groups, and I just wasn't really finding anything until this was before, I go back a ways, so this was before the days of the internet. And one day I was looking at the Boston Globe, and I saw this little tiny agate 8-point ad for the Ramakrishna Vedanta Society in Boston, and it said that there was a teacher, Swami Sarvagatananda, who would actually meet with you and talk with you. So I thought that was amazing. So I wrote him a letter. I wrote to the Vedanta Society, and I addressed it to Swami Sarvagatananda, and I sent it out on a Monday. And to my total amazement, you know, from my experience with this other group, I never even thought I'd hear back from anybody. To my amazement, I got home from work and the phone rang, and on the phone was Swami Sarvagatananda. And if you know us old folks who have been around for a while, all he said was, "You come." So he said, "When you come?" So I said, well, I'll come, anytime. He said, "You come Saturday at 4 o'clock. He said, "We're on Deerfield Street in Boston in Kenmore Square." Well, I knew Kenmore Square pretty well, and Deerfield Street's just this little tiny street off to the side. I thought this guy was crazy, man. There's no Deerfield Street off of Kenmore Square. Yeah, I went down there, I got to Kenmore Square. There was a Deerfield Street. I knocked on the door, and George opened the door. And I went up and I talked with Swami for I don't know how long. And he just was such a totally loving, wonderful person. It's just coincidental that it's his 106th birthday, but he was wonderful, and as he would with anybody, he just welcomed me into Vedanta, just encouraged me to come. And one thing about Swami was he would, no matter who you were, he just kept telling you to keep coming. And every time he saw you the next time, he wanted to know when you were coming next time. And he would invite you to whatever was happening next. And after a while, you knew you just better be there. So he just always was inviting and just always expressing this love that was just a wonderful part of Vedanta. The best lesson I really learned from him was just his dedication. When he was in his mid-80s, he ran both of these centers, both in Boston and New York. And he was here 3 days a week and in Boston 4 days a week and giving talks virtually every night, seeing devotees. His focus was really on love. I remember stopping by devotees' houses, and every time I went to their house, I'd be sitting there, and Swami would call him on the phone. It just was always happening. He was always reaching out to people in such an incredible, warm, and loving way. Just a brief story about Swami Swami was initiated by Swami Akhandananda, who was one of Ramakrishna's original direct disciples. And Vivekananda told him at one point, he said, I want you to go to Kankal, which is 800 miles away, and I want you to work with Kalyananda at his Sevananda hospital. Swami said, how am I going to get there? He said, you're a monk, you walk. So Swami really even had no shoes. He walked barefoot 800 miles to Kankal, which was a long way. And basically, he became Swami Kalyananda's right-hand person, working in that hospital and serving the people of that area for virtually at no cost, and helping them medically and saving many lives. And that's basically how he developed his way of serving. So everywhere I go in Vedanta, whether it's with Swami Yogatmananda or Swami Sarvagatananda or any of the Swamis that we see, we basically have this outreach of love and support that's just basically always there for us. And it's so rare. I mean, you just don't find this kind of community and these kind of teachers. It's very, very unusual. So I think we're really very fortunate. We can come here, hear an inspired talk. If we have questions regarding our spiritual practice, we know we can get really good guidance, help with meditation, and we're all just really very fortunate. So it's just a pleasure to be involved with this Vedanta Society. It's a very loving family, a loving community, and it's a great support to my and I think all of our spiritual growth. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for your recounting of your experiences with your spiritual journey in Swami Sarvagatananda. And I think you boiled down to the essence, love and service, right, which is a teaching of very, very many of these Swamis. Our last speaker for tonight will be Vishwanath, and his topic is Thoughts on Spiritual Inspiration. So Vishwanath, please come up.
I would like to share a few thoughts on this auspicious occasion of the 106th birthday of Swami Sarvagatananda. This is the season of Thanksgiving, and I am sincerely grateful to have been guided by Swami's greatness of spirit and goodness of heart. I met the Swami for the first time in the fall of 1968 at Providence. As I became more and more involved with the Providence Vedanta Center over the next 40 years, I came to realize this Swami to be truly a giant of a personality, not only in head and heart, but in his extraordinary ability of intuition. Swami Sarvagatananda lived his life by the lessons he taught. With all of his devotees and friends, the Swami was invariably practical and pragmatic in his approach to all of life's problems. It's amazing how many people approach him with problems, physical, mental, emotional, theological, metaphysical. His answers were direct and straightforward, without any attempt at sideswiping, but always tinged with love and compassion, sympathy and empathy. None of them ever felt alienated because of his directness. In fact, everyone became an ardent devotee and felt they had at last met their guru to whom they could unreservedly unburden themselves. The Swami was a man of clean heart and clear mind and enormous courage. Face the brute was his mantra to all of us. To anyone struggling with an emotional problem, he would say, we can always be brave, but if we get lost in sorrow or fear, then we must be brave. The uniqueness of Swami Sarvagatananda was that he never preached anything that was mysterious or mystical, something that he had not practiced himself. He had nothing to do whatsoever with any esoteric teachings. His insight into spiritual life was extraordinary and phenomenal. To him, religion is science. He said that religious scientists discovered the truth. Ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. The truth is one, sages call it variously. Primordial energy or power in the universe originated from a single cosmic source. He urged us to read the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, particularly his Karma Yoga. The poems of Swami Vivekananda had a great fascination for Swamiji. Vivekananda's poem, To a Friend, brings out Swami Vivekananda's innermost feelings. He says, "Listen, friend, I will speak my heart to thee. I have found in my life this truth supreme. Love, love, love is the only jewel. These are his manifold forms before thee, rejecting, where seekest thou for God, who loves all beings without distinction? He indeed is worshipping best his God." The entire poem is essentially Swami Vivekananda's spiritual autobiography, according to Swami Sarvagatananda. Swami Vivekananda questioned, "Is it true? Is it true?" All of us should question, he says. Vedanta is a science that helps us in our search for truth, the ultimate truth. Swami Sarvagatananda used to quote the Taittiriya Upanishad, "Tat Shrishtva Tadeva Anupravishat," that is, having created the universe, God entered into it. God is an active participant in all our affairs. Any learning, secular or spiritual, is a process of osmosis. Swami used to say, spiritual life is extremely simple. Do not make it complicated. God is within all, only it is hidden. Go here. All we have to do is to manifest this divine spark. Spirituality cannot be taught. It has to be caught. And catch it you will when you come across a shining example, free from all trappings, pure to the very core of the being. Swami Vivekananda says, spiritual experience changes matter to spirit by the force of love. In a fulfilled life, hate not and hurt not is the law. In a divine being, love and serve is the law. Do good to others, but do not expect anything in return. Be detached, reflect and do not react. Be truthful, be alert, be mindful, be focused, be active. Have a hero's will and a mother's heart. Do not accuse, demand or complain, but love, respect and cooperate with all. Do not find fault with others, but try to find your own faults. Do not treat others as strangers, but make everyone your own. Expansion is life, contraction is death. Lead a conscientious life. Remind yourself often that you are the pure loving consciousness. That is your true nature. Do not seek God, but see God. See the omnipresent light of the Spirit that is shining forth from all forms, from the highest Brahman to the lowliest insect. These are just a few of the instructions that I heard for more than 40 years from the lips of the holy man. He was born on 25th November, according to my notes, anyway, 1912, in an Orthodox Telugu Brahmin family. He had a religious upbringing with stress on moral and ethical values. His father, Nrisimha Shastri, a renowned Sanskrit scholar, taught him the scriptures. At the age of 13, the father took his little young son to meet Mahatma Gandhi, and this proved to be an important milestone in the young boy's spiritual journey. At the age of 22, in 1934, Swami Sarvagatananda, that is, he graduated from Bombay University and soon after met Swami Akhandananda, who initiated him and later sent him to Swami Kalyanananda at the Kankal Ramakrishna Mission Sevashrama in the foothills of the Himalayas. His experiences in that hospital are beautifully illustrated, beautifully narrated in this little book here, You Will Be a Paramahamsa. In 1944, he was initiated into sannyasa by the President Maharaj, Swami Virajananda, and sent to Karachi to serve Swami Ranganathananda. And between 1948 and 1954, he was in charge of the postgraduate students' hostel at Visakhapatnam in Andhra Pradesh. In 1954, he was asked to go to Providence, Rhode Island. For the next 55 years, from October 1954 to May 2009, he stayed with us. He hardly ever moved out of the Boston-Providence area. He seldom took a vacation. He led an austere life. For the Swami, the highest human ethic is not I, but we. He used to say the only hope for mankind lies in a collective existence, not I or them, but we. He was the very soul of practical religion, an experiential religion, not an ethnical religion. He was the very personification of unselfish, loving service, so compassionate, so undemanding, above all, so innocent, but with the wisdom of great sages and saints of the past and the present. He transformed our lives. He loved us all and showed us how to love one another and thus develop and grow. Is it a coincidence that Swami Sarvagatananda was born on a Sunday, got initiated on a Sunday, experienced many important events of his life on Sundays, and finally passed on Sunday, May 3rd, 2009? Appropriately, his parents named him, when he was born on Sunday, Surya Narayana, a true gift of sun god Surya. He proved to be the bright sunshine all through life. On this auspicious day, we offer our heartfelt thanks to Swami Sarvagatanandaji. In this season of Thanksgiving, we give thanks to many, show our gratitude to many, count our many blessings, and it's only fitting and proper that we pay homage to one of the noblest teachers on this day. Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you all. And this book gives about 60 reminiscences of Swami Sarvagatananda from 60 different devotees. Beautiful book. And it says, the lamplighter, Swami Sarvagatananda in the West. And these three are the books of Swami Sarvagatananda: Sri Krishna Yoga, Vedanta for the Common Man, and God is Everything. These are the most beautiful books for any spiritual seeker. The guidance is fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vishwanath, for recounting the great teachings of Swami Sarvagatananda, who did so much for both the Boston and Providence Center. I just have a couple of announcements. There's a retreat coming up on December 8th by Swami Yogatmananda from 9:30 to 5. The topic is The Kingdom of God is Within You. This coming Tuesday, the talk will be given by Professor Suklayan Sangupta on pilgrimage sites associated with Holy Mother. Swami Yogatmananda will be back Friday in time to resume the classes on the Svetashvatara Upanishads. Following our retreat, we will have our traditional soup supper downstairs, where you have the chance to also follow up and have some discussion with tonight's speakers. My heartfelt thanks to all of the speakers who contributed their lives, a little bit of their life stories with us tonight. I'm not surprised, as I told you in my opening, about the depth and breadth of all of the different people every time I meet somebody. And I've always been guided by one rule of management, which I heard from a very successful person, which is, when you need something done, don't tell people how to do it. Just give them a hint of what needs to be done. And their creativity and ingenuity and their thoughtfulness will shine through, and they'll produce something that's always surprising. So now I'm no longer surprised, because I've seen that law in action so many times. So with that, thank you. We'll now have Arati.
Closing prayer.
Oh. We'll do the closing prayer. We got to change the order. I think that comes before the announcements. I think that's why it always gets missed. May the Divine, who is Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Great Spirit of the Native Americans, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the all-loving being manifest himself unto us and grant us abiding understanding and all-consuming divine love. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.